All right, hello everybody, and welcome to a special kind of Shaping Agility podcast. Um, Mark
That
and I
is
decided to get a little
successful this time.
more successful than the last two experiments. Welcome to the transparency of our approach. What Mark and I wanted to do is we've been hatching this crazy little experiment for like 5 or 6 months now, since May, and we've been doing the streaming thing with a new community for the last 2 months. And with that consistency and the growing group of people that are collaborating, we wanted to share a little bit about what we're up to, what our vision was, how this whole crazy experiment came about, and just a current working model for where we're headed and why we're doing this. Mark, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I'd probably just come back on the spirit of transparency. This is also the next phase of our experimentation because up till now I've been the learning host for everything, and today's Eric's first time hosting. So,
Hey, thank you. And that what that means is everything on the Twitch streaming. This is my first time ever streaming. It's exciting. Weird nerves too getting into it, but that's not the purpose of this video or this conversation. So, so what I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and pop a share here, and look, magic buttons work as expected. Is talk through four topics really. What is this thing and why did we do it? What are the vision and the values and the impetus, kind of the mindset that underlies it for the two of us and for a pretty good cross section of the people that are joining us? Our very lightweight draft of how we want to govern this thing going forward, because having a plan is part of running an experiment so we can see how it works. And I think that's pretty much it for today that we want to do. Yeah. All right, so let's dig in. What is this, Mark? Do you want to kick off the why conversation? Because I think you were a little further ahead of me in the thinking when we started.
look, I think I'd probably rewind just slightly to why are we streaming this today,
Yeah.
and maybe the backdrop to that is a conversation I had with my wife in between the book club we ran in the wee hours of this morning in my time zone, and this conversation where she looked at me and she went, "Mark, you are literally buzzing with energy. What's going on?" And I went, "We streamed a book club this morning." And she went, "Well, go figure." And then I was telling her a little bit more and just the evolution. And she went, "So really what you're telling us is the way that you are figuring out this community is the way that you tell other people they should work, iterate, learn, be transparent." And I went, "Yeah." So that for me is the backdrop. We've been doing this with a small group and some friends that we trusted to give us feedback on our first experiments. And we hit a point last week where we went, we're probably ready to let a little bit more of the world know what we're doing, because we've got to the point where our learning opportunities are slightly less embarrassing than they were in the beginning. And so Eric and I got together and we went, well, how do we put a little bit more definition around what we've figured out so far? Partially in kind of backing a blog post that I've got drafted, ready to go, hey, this is a little bit of my backstory. And we dropped it on this Miro, which was probably iteration number 10 of the thinking that began. And I think there's a bit of this where I go, this began when I sat on a train from Munich to Prague, buzzing about the collaboration that I'd just had co-teaching our own material with Wolfgang and Sahil. But then really it began when I sat in the sun outside my room in Mexico, hour after hour, talking about the thinking of what would it look like to create a collaboration community in between discussing the manifesto for a moral revolution and the importance of purpose-driven thinking to what that collaboration might look like. Back to you, Eric.
Yeah. I think that was about the time you and I started talking more deeply for the first time in 4 years. I mean, we kind of
Yeah.
didn't talk much during COVID. We'd routinely seen each other at events before that, and then disconnected for a good long while. And coming back together, I think we discovered that both of us had evolved in our thinking. We were both in very different positions um, in the community and also in our kind of professional career progression. And I know for myself, I was very much deep into thinking about what I wanted to do next. What's the legacy I want to leave? What's the next phase of my career? All those kinds of conversations. And it was the perfect soil for when you started talking about new collaboration, new community, new ways of working together. It's like, yes, please, easy. I mean, we have a relationship habit around loving the hell yeah attitude with my partner and I, and like it just you just brought that out. It's like, yes, I want in. Whatever it is, I want in. Let's do it. And I think it's because as consultants, you and I have both been craving this for a long time. We needed places to talk, people to have deep conversations with, and a way to get outside the loneliness of being the person on stage all the time. And then add to that the learning attitudes and the growth mindset that we share, and the fact that I never leave a conversation with you without at least one new idea. And it was kind of like, how do we make this happen? It wasn't do we, it's how do we, was the immediate conversation.
So I got very distracted from the why question,
Yeah. So why?
but that's I guess part of the habit we've formed as this community's happen is we trigger connections, but we know everything has to be centered in why. And I remember, so the backdrop, and it's sitting in my head so vividly now. There was a banana lounge just outside my room on the balcony of a backpacker hotel in Mexico. And I just planted myself for hour after hour on that thing, talking to you on Discord. And I'm like, oh, we need to collaborate. We need to chat on Discord. We need to stream. And you kept going, why? What's the why of what we're doing? And I kept going, but we need to do this stuff. And how many times have we talked about the golden circle and the need to talk about why? But I think that boils back to there's plenty of places you can access information or Slack channels you can join or, goodness knows what. You've got to have some meaningful purpose to what a collaboration's, what difference is it meant to make, as opposed to somewhere to periodically take a glance at, catch up on things you've missed, and then forget about it again. Mm-hmm. And if there's one thing about any conversation with Eric, it's that if I've got 2 models I'm thinking about, he's got 10 models he's thinking about, and he flashes one up and I go, why didn't I know about that?
That is a mutual feeling, by
the way. And then I go, damn, I've just added 3 books to my reading list. So Eric, literally this was a fresh dump on me 3 or 4 days ago. Eric's like, what about the Ikigai model? And I went, what on earth is the Ikigai model? And he showed this beautiful picture of, that Venn diagram of what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. And finding the absolute center of that. And I went, oh, that's a nice way of framing it. And I still haven't gone and done the back referencing. I assume there's a book this one came from, Eric.
I don't know. I was actually introduced to it by Chelsea, although it is very close to Jim Collins' hedgehog model and others that I've looked at over the years. The new one for me when I was introduced to this a year ago or so was the what the world needs part.
Yeah. So if we zoomed out this mirror and went to 10 iterations of our thinking on why, we had a lot of post-its about why. But one of the things that's happened as the community's gone by is we've started to develop shared language, shared vision. And when we made a bit of homework for setting up for this stream, I was like, okay, these are the things we've got to talk about in a quick run through of it. And Eric was more active on his homework than me. And the next call we got on, he shared the section about shaping agility here with the why, how, what, what's next and later. I looked at it and I went, yeah, okay, perfect. No need to edit. I think I had 2 post-its which I'd marked with a question, and he used some of his extra fancy language, and we had to smarten it down. But what's the why? We want social learning. We want to share with joy and mutually inspire each other. Be less lonely. Eric's already alluded to it. It's just a constant feeling for me, is that opportunity to have the deep interaction. Again, I was debriefing on my buzz from this morning's book club. Sitting in a book club with 5 people who are all deep readers, who all read dozens, if not hundreds of books every year. And every time you look at something, somebody in that group goes, oh, and here's 3 other books that we could link this to. And you listen to them and you go, oh, yeah, I read that one and that one. Yeah, oh, that's a nice connection. Oh, I haven't read that one. Maybe I need to add it to my list. Like, the buzz and the provocation and growth you get from that type of interaction is amazing. And, you know, it just gives you global reach. But I think that was the other bit of the why was, you know, what comes out of this. We've all got thinking. We've all got stuff we create. But my parallel, and maybe this is probably amplifying our intent a little bit too far, but what I often describe when I talk about the Agile Manifesto is I talk about a bunch of guys who all had ideas about how they changed the world, and they had stuff they agreed on and stuff they vehemently disagreed on. But they got together and they said, if we can figure out the stuff we agree on, can we change the world together more effectively than we're currently changing it separately? And there's definitely a bit of that for me in what it's feeling like as we start to experiment with it.
Yeah.
So that's why.
I don't think I have anything to add to that one.
Are we going to tag team? Is it how for you?
Oh, I suppose. Yeah, let's do that. So, in that progression, before we get into exactly what we're doing, we wanted to kind of lay forth the principles by which we would do this. And these have evolved a little bit. Actually, I don't know that they have evolved at all since we started talking. They tweaked a little bit, but nothing significant. We knew that we needed energy. It had to be a tiny group of founders that would really just drive it forward. Mark and I have been putting the lion's share of the energy in. Wolfgang and Sahil have been showing up week in, week out and participated deeply. And we needed that consistency, and one person can't provide that consistency. It had to be a group that was willing to put the time in and the energy in. And we needed that. And now it's growing, and the book club had 2 people on it that weren't part of the normal streaming crowd, and I think we're going to see more and more guests of various sorts that check in, join the stream, and maybe they leave, maybe they never leave. We can do some song references if we want to, but we want to keep that group pretty small. We'll have guests come in and out, but to start, we know we need to learn fast, we need to move fast. We don't want to get into an environment where it's decision by committee or decision by mass consensus. So we're picking on passion, the people that are coming in, bringing energy, and that we already have a really solid, close relationship with. What that lets us do, and that the trust and the known expectation for how people will behave, is that we can iterate incredibly rapidly, testing our purpose, testing the path out, changing direction if we need to, just by communicating it in one channel. We don't have to keep broadcasting it. We don't have to do a change management exercise. We can just talk about it and things have changed. It also lets us have a very loose trust-based governance approach. Any community needs some governing mechanisms. I think that's something Mark and I very quickly agreed on when we first started brainstorming this is if we didn't have a model for the governance, it would get chaotic or fall apart and die off very quickly. But that doesn't mean we can't learn from our day jobs and have the lightest possible, easiest governance for a community. And we started looking for a lot of sources of new ideas for governing that, frankly, are well outside the corporate ecosystem. Non-capitalistic companies, worker cooperatives. We started looking at a lot of different ideas for how to do this. And actually, I think we got our biggest inspiration from a collective named Greater Than that I was introduced to by Lisa Atkins and met a couple of the leading members of that group when I was in Spain this summer. The other things we decided early, again, this is for the ease, for protecting the people involved, frankly, and making it very simple, is we're kind of sticking to solo, small boutique consultants for the consultants that are in the group for now. There's lots of good people working in large companies, but they bring with them a lot of challenges interacting with their employers and the things they can and can't say, where Mark works for himself. I work for myself. We can go talk to the boss in real time if we need to, if we're upset with something. And it goes back to that loose governance and ease element. We also did not want to deal with the challenges of creating a 3-continent commercial entity. I mean, we've already got people across at least 3 continents, if I haven't missed any, and 5 or 6 countries. It's just easier right now not to have any commercials flowing through the thing we're building. Shaping Agility is Shaping Agility. It's the group of people, we get together, we collaborate. We've got a little bit of a backing set of technology that Mark and I are funding for the moment because we want to. And then because of all of this, it is a journey for me in radical transparency, like utter transparency. We're having this conversation live on a stream. Like, to think about doing this inside a corporate setting just blows my mind. And yet it's getting easier and easier and more comfortable, and it just feels so damn natural the more I do it. This transparency is new and exciting. Anything you want to add to how?
Well, that was how. Again, it's that you listen and you go, yeah, that's the conversation we had.
Yeah.
Have I got anything to add to how? No. I want to talk about what.
Okay, well, here, I'm going to give you a big what to talk about.
I'll do is I'll just back you thinking about the radical transparency. And in the beginning, I think when we had our first couple of streams, even though there were no listeners, like the only listener we had to our first 2 streaming sessions was my daughter, who is an audio engineer and filled in a lot of the gaps in my understanding of what was involved. But even at that point, you sat and you went, hang on, whatever I'm saying, anybody in the world could be saying that, will be available to anybody who randomly Googles for the next 7 days at that point. And so there was a piece where it's going, okay, be sensitive, be hyper aware of sensitive information. There's another piece which is that we're used to standing on stage with processed thoughts. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden we're exposing that moment where we suddenly sit for 5 seconds because we've got to try and figure out how to digest something that just came out of that radical transparency and the vulnerability that's involved is very interesting. So there we go. I've added one thing. Let's talk about what. So if we start with what, part of the beginning of what for me was actually the Discord thing. So I'm a gamer. I know lots of gamers in our world. Eric's a gamer as well. We play very different games. But if it comes to virtual collaboration, the gaming industry is so many light years ahead of corporate that it's not funny. You know, we've been building vibrant, highly collaborative, global collaboration communities for years in the gaming world, and in very sophisticated ways, you know. And when we had to figure out virtual collaboration with COVID, it felt very primitive, super primitive. Like my son is a great example. His school was actually a step ahead in being prepared for it because they'd had a practice for the 5 years before COVID where they did 2 days a year of digital delivery. And it was notionally set up as a disaster recovery preparation exercise where they went, we want to, if we're for some reason one day forced to do digital delivery, we want to be ready for it. So they were ready to flip the switch really rapidly. They had all the infrastructure in place. They'd done it 2 days a year. They just suddenly had to do it every day. And my son, who was, I don't know, 15, 16 at the time, also a gamer, just was forever joking about how primitive the school collaboration stuff was. You know, they're sitting there on Teams and notes and whatever, and he's used to collaborating with his mates on Discord. And I went, yeah, you're right, because there's so many things that are so easy out of the box on gaming channels or gaming oriented servers that just aren't there in the commercial ones. But particularly the difference is the social thing, where he gets home from school and he hops in chat channels on Discord and he walks around the house wearing his headphones, and he is constantly hanging out in a group chat with his friends. And he might be in a group chat with his friends while he's washing the dishes, or while he's lying on the couch reading a book, or while he's doing his homework. He's probably in a voice chat with one group and text chats with 3 other groups. He just hangs out because even though they're all doing different things, they've got a conversation that starts and stops, or they share a funny moment, which is kind of what we used to have when we sat next to each other in an office. But that's not the way people use Teams. People use Teams with, oh, there's a call scheduled, I better dial in. And, you know, life is a succession of half-hour meetings as opposed to we hang out in a shared channel and we talk and we laugh and we share those moments. And I went, oh, man, imagine we could create virtual collaboration like we do on Discord in a corporate setting in this post-COVID world. And I started to think it'd be nice to experiment with that. You know, what does that look like? Could you experiment with, in your private life, a virtual hangout world, and then figure out things you could take back to your clients who are trying to navigate that world? So we'll try a Discord server. So Eric discovered recently as a gamer, my name is Silk. So I carefully created a non-gaming name-based Discord presence and a non-gaming Discord server. And went, let's start getting people to collaborate on that. And we'll have chat channels and text channels, and we'll just figure out what it looks like to try and get people to work together on Discord. That was where we began. And then the next thing was, well, let's share our conversations. Let's try streaming. And I wanted raw conversations. I didn't want polished content like you'd put together for a webinar. I wanted reality, and I wanted to be able to talk to people while we were doing the reality. And so I said, well, let's stream. And of course, the gaming community again. People make a living streaming in the gaming community. They stream while they play games together. And so I was like, well, let's try Twitch. And as much as anything else, the nice thing about Twitch was I felt like it was a safe place to experiment live, because no professional person was going to find us on Twitch because you only go there to look at games. So we started just streaming, and really we went, well, we get together, we have conversations, and the conversations follow all kinds of weird and wonderful paths. You never know quite where you're going to wind up or where you're going to get back to where you started. But let's start streaming that. And Twitch by default maintains the things for 7 days, and then they disappear. I went, well, hang on a second. It'd be nice to be able to preserve it a little bit longer. So I started watching video editing tutorials and started to edit out some of our most glaring hiccups in our streams and sticking them up on YouTube to preserve it for later access. And, along the way, of course, being interested in learning, we told people we didn't mind seeing our early mistakes, and we said, hey, can you check this out and give us some feedback? Would you be interested? And, would you keep watching? What would you change? And so we got that nice kind of controlled early experimentation. That's been the what so far. And I think week by week we make slightly less mistakes and we figure out slightly more about the tools we're using and become a little bit more intentional about some of the conversations we have, and try different things. And this morning was an example. It was we decided to start a book club on the 5th discipline, and this morning was an hour and a half about, well, the goal was to talk about the first 6 or 7 chapters of the book. We made it through the introduction in the first chapter, but it was a fun start to the day. So that's what would you add to what, Eric?
First, I'd add an appreciation. This is one Mark's daughter Sammy, lifesaver, hero, accelerated the quality by months probably of self-iteration, just bringing her professional skills and happily volunteering to help. So thank you. And then just a recognition as we look at this, how much Mark has had to do. I've been traveling for much of the last 6 months really, and just now got back to my base in Mexico. So I started out with just a laptop, didn't have any of my gear or anything that made it easy. Did not have a machine that was capable of doing the video editing at any reasonable point of time. I was on internet that downloading one of our videos took me all day and uploading it. I gave up because it wouldn't run overnight successfully. Reminded me of the old days of tech in a big way. But so thank you, Mark, for doing the vast majority of the editing and maintenance work to get this started. I'm excited to carry my weight a little bit better on that front now that I have my gear. As the slightly fewer mistakes, and I guess I'll just comment also slightly more toys as we go week after week and change the settings and change the environment and so on. But it's fun. It's been a long time since I've been this lit up, and you mentioned your wife saying that about your energy and what you've been up to, and I've had people I just randomly haven't caught up with for months be like, you look so healthy and happy and engaged. And it's like, yeah, I am. For the first time in a long time, I'm really just deeply enjoying what I'm doing on this front. So that's what I'll add to the what. And yeah, and then we've each got, we're not going to put it in this session, I don't think, but we've each got our other what's going on, and everything's nicely compatible, and we get to work together and share feedback, and some of that's been on other streams. You can go watch videos of me talking to Wolfgang about stuff, or Mark sharing his newest workshop for critical feedback before it's even a quarter baked. And it's fun. It's the stuff we don't get to do day to day anywhere. But it's also stuff we get to do in service to others. We're talking, we're being incredibly transparent as we have these streams, but we also get to maintain that little bit of customer centricity at the back of our head and think, who's listening and how is this helping them? How is this serving?
Yep.
And that can, back to the why, that's a big part of it for me as well. So what's next, Mark? Is that mine? Who's next on what's next? I'm first.
I feel like we're just, tag teaming here. So we're back to you. What's next, Eric?
So I got a few things. Could call this the incredibly lightweight roadmap, and by that we mean 4 Post-its. One thing we do need to do is put a member directory up. We will take shapingagility.com. I just happen to own the website for the last few years. Right now it redirects to, I think, this Twitch stream or the YouTube, one of the two. But we'll put a page up there, who's part of this, a little bit of a member directory. And then from that point, one of the things we hope to do, and this goes back to the little bit of a financial motive we have on this is marketing. It is reach. It's an opportunity to get ourselves out in front of a broader audience than any one of the community members could. And part of that is sharing what we're all up to in a commercial sense as well. Not because we want to make Shaping Agility commercial, but because we are all thought leaders with our own careers and things that we do. And if you hear Mark or Wolfgang or Sahil talking about their new workshop on the stream, it'd be great if you could also go find them and talk to them about it. So we want to get things out there and linked and what are we up to from that sense. And then the other thing is, Mark can tell more detail here, but one of the first things we did in the Discord server was coming out of the Prague Safe Summit last year was a collaboration from one of the working groups. The SBCTs in that group got together. They wanted to keep contributing and creating and placed it in Discord and started collaborating. And I think it's really cool that we have the opportunity to create a space for that kind of collaboration for other communities, not just our own. And in the next section, we talk about the governance, or in a couple sections, when we talk about the governance model, you'll start to see some of where that will fit. Because it does create an opportunity to get people together doing cool learning and really fitting with our ethos and our values and our attitude without having to be any sort of like formal adoption or joining or any annoying crap like that. And then the other thing is Mark mentioned the copious pile of books we talk about. One thing we will do is probably relatively soon monetize links to those books as we put them in the stream. Basically think of that as a way to pay for the technology fees. We're not expecting it to be a real source of revenue, all that will just go back into running the stream at first just to see it, but Amazon referral links, whatever makes sense for the products and books that we do mention later. And I guess what's next and later is close enough, but I'll let Mark talk about the next section because it's a new Post-it note.
So obviously, we went backwards and forwards an awful lot in those formative discussions of, is this a purpose-driven thing? Is it a commercial thing? We're really oriented towards purpose. But we all know we've got to feed our families. And, the more we do of this, the more time it consumes. And so we played and the inspiration around, what's the name of that group? The stewardship folks. Greater than, right? So Eric pointed me at greater than stuff and went, this looks cool. And then I'm not sure if it was me looking at greater than who found the back reference, or Eric went, this is the back reference. And the back reference was a stewardship model, which was oriented towards, if you like, a commercial not-for-profit. Mm-hmm. What happened if you're running a commercial property that you had no intent of being able to sell? And the property was meant, the concept was meant to be able to outlive critical people leaving it. And, yet one of many things that Eric's maybe go and read. Well, inspired me to go and read might be another way to talk about it. So we're thinking about that going, look, there's a reality, we all work, we've all got to find time for this. What does that look like? We compared our value statements and we both had statements. Eric's are always slightly more elegant and sophisticated than mine, but I think mine looks something like, I value impact over profit, but I also acknowledge I've got to make a living. And that was part of the trade-off we're doing through the whole notion of what is shaping agility. And we said, look, in the beginning, if we're talking about our ideas and our ideas are reaching a broader organization and we're each doing stuff, then as our ideas become more visible, that makes people aware of the other stuff we're doing. And whether it's new workshops and courses that I'm developing or Wolfgang's developing, or whether it's Eric and his leadership mentoring program at Unleashing Scale, you know, there's a redirect back out there that I think every member of the community gets to start to, you know, I'll give you for free my great ideas, and boy, you might want to be able to come back and go deeper with me on something commercial. But we also started to say, hey, wouldn't it be nice to build up shared collateral, and maybe one day start thinking about having some kind of content library and, you know, a subscription-based model in terms of various things that you might offer through the community, whether they happen to be, you know, workshop templates or Miro templates, or, you know, professionally edited down content instead of stream of thought streams. It's most definitely a coming later, because we didn't want to bog ourselves down with that in the beginning. We just wanted to be able to iterate and learn. But there's definitely a sense in our head that at some point, this thing needs to at least be able to self-fund. And I keep just buying new toys every week at the moment to go, I need this, it's going to make the stream better. And I'm watching Eric buy new toys as well. I think we actually had a stream where he bought a toy from Amazon, and we kept tracking the shipping progress from it while the stream was going on. So that's probably the kind of later goal, is to go, okay, as this starts to become a little bit more meaty, if it can generate a bit more money that pays for the time spent, that would probably head down that content library type subscription path. We'll figure that out when we get there. We know it's a fuzzy idea in the far future at the moment.
Yeah. I will say, and this is probably a good transition into the values, though, is one of the things we want to avoid, that we are very intentional with, the two of us and each person that joins us, is not allowing that commercial goal to be front and center in any way. This is about learning and sharing. That's the purpose of this community. And that's the nature of an over, and going back to the manifesto and the this over that mindset. So if it drives profit and benefit to the individuals, that's amazing. But we will not let it take precedence in the way that it damages the experience or makes this less fun or less enjoyable for us as participants or any potential future listeners. As I notice, our streaming has ticked up from 1 to 2 people listening to this live.
I wonder who's listening.
So with that, I think maybe jump into values. Just a quick note, we're 38 minutes in against our 40-minute time box as we go to section 2 out of 3.
There we go.
Oh, well.
Maybe we accelerate at some point.
So let's talk about values. We did an exercise. Actually, I'm going to go hide this while we talk about where this came from. Did an exercise with the 4 original people who joined, and basically said, what's in it for you? Why do you do this? What is your guiding set of values? And I'll admit I cheated a little bit, because I think about this on an annual basis, and I have them written and I have them captured. But before we get into like what's a shared why, it is absolutely necessary for each person involved to bring their individual why. If you want to hear more about that entire concept, listen to the 5th Discipline book club this morning, where we talk about you can't have a learning organization without having an organization of learners. And the same concept applies to purpose-driven. You can't have an organization come together around a purpose if the people in it are unaware of their individual purposes and how they relate. And we did this individual exercise where each person captured the values, and I think everybody kind of ended up following a template that I used, but everybody wrote their own. And then we put them together, and I mean, Mark said this a few times, it's like reading them, it's like, yeah, I don't need to edit those, I don't need to ask questions. They were close enough that, other than maybe me using fancy consultant words and Mark using simple, plain, well understood language. Um, they were kind of the same thing. And when Sahil aired his in, it was more of the same. And everybody had individual nuances and things that drove them. But the commonality was astounding. And that's a piece of who we are as an organization as a result, and will remain being, if I have anything to say about it. So getting into the values that we pulled together, this list came from me going back to that initial workshop and looking across and being like, I just have to draw some Venn diagrams here and get the common ones, and then we'll wordsmith. And there were a handful of manifesto-like statements of what we value more than others, because many values are actually a set of trade-offs. So what are we choosing over something else? And then there are a few that just kind of infuse who we are, that if we don't include them, if we don't make them explicit, we'll forget about them, or we won't, future people that join won't be aware of them. But kind of stand on their own and don't need an over. Like, if I look at assume positive intent over assuming negative intent, I don't need the over there. We're going to lean in, we're going to assume that people are engaging to the best of their ability. Go read the retrospective prime directive, because it's kind of that. We assume that people are doing the best they can and trying to do good things in the world. We believe that any engagement that we have as individuals or collectively or conversation should leave the world a better place. We're not tearing things down, we're building things, we're trying to create. And then this one's a little bit more of a reminder, I think, than most, is remember there's people listening. Not only like, oh, don't tell secrets or don't share anything, because I think as professional consultants, we're all pretty good at keeping our clients' concerns very close to heart and not sharing them, or we wouldn't be good consultants anymore. But it's our version of customer centricity. We will keep in mind the people that are listening and why are we sharing in the first place. Sometimes it's just to have a banter. Sometimes it's to explore a topic for our benefit. And sometimes it's to explore a topic for others' benefit. And empathy for the audience is kind of knowing which version of that are we in at any given moment and being attentive to that. And from there, it becomes a little more truth in advertising. If you listen into our Saturday sessions, you're getting a bunch of very experienced safe agilists bantering with each other about stuff close to heart. And we'll vaguely wave some hands at the needs of others in the process. Other streams that we'll run will be very much about exploring an idea for the benefit of the people listening. And we'll keep that empathy front and center at any given moment, that customer centricity. Anything you want to add?
I'm going to jump in on the green ones for just a second. And really, it's an illustration of the empathy for audience playing out. So I was chatting to a fairly new RTE a couple of weeks ago. And he's like, where do I go to learn, Mark? Where do I go to learn? And, you know, I've been to a bunch of safe meetups. I'm not learning anything there. I went to a great one on flow accelerators that Andy Sales did, but all the rest of them, I didn't understand why I spent my time there. Where can I go and learn? And I pointed him to a couple of things, and I wanted to say, you should come and watch Shaping Agility. And I went, where he is on the journey and the level of abstraction that we talk about in our Saturday sessions, I can't send him to Shaping Agility, because we're having a discussion that I know people at a certain level of expertise go, that's fun, right? I really enjoy that. It makes me think. But we hadn't been deliberately going, who's this conversation for? We're sharing it, we're blasting out in the world. And it's probably something missing from our what's next. In actual fact, I'm going to just go and live edit the what's next, right? Oh, yeah, there we go. And I'll hit the right button.
I don't know if I want to go look at what you're doing.
I seem to be somehow in read-only mode on the Miro. I'll talk while I'm typing it. But it's that being quite deliberate in our streaming about who's the audience of this thing, right? Are we putting content out that's useful to somebody at the early stage of their journey, the late stage of their journey, before we suggest to somebody that they watch a 2-hour stream. Can we give them a bit of a heads up?
Added.
So it's an example of that kind of living the values of the empathy moment, of, you know, looking for that feedback and going, are we thinking about this? Are we actually speaking to different people's needs that we might be able to help? So that was my jumping on the greens. Are we tagging to me over the yellows?
We can, but I want to add one more since we're giving illustrations. The other thing that I've found valuable for myself in the empathy for audience, and as I think about it more, is frankly, it keeps me off my soapboxes. Like, an audience doesn't want to hear the same topic repeatedly, and it keeps me curious instead of looking at the things that I'm wanting to talk about all the time, because it's like I could talk about the program I'm building day in, day out. It's the center of my life right now, but y'all don't want to hear that all the time. Once in a while, sure, but not all the time. And being attentive to that, I think, is an important element of that empathy.
If I riffed on that a little bit, I think the other thing with the empathy is getting feedback. If I look at this next stage where we're becoming more public, what I'm looking forward to most is more feedback, more questions coming in about the things we're talking about.
Yes.
And, you know, I was chatting to Eric about this way back in the beginning of it all. I said, there's a piece of me that hates doing conference presentations because I thrive on interacting with my audience.
Mm-hmm.
And then being able to shape my conversation based on what's happening in the interaction. Because as they ask questions, as we interact, I go, oh, that's the thing that you really need me to be talking about. And I hate it at conference because, you know, you get feedback that, you know, you look at the people who sat in the front row to encourage you, and you look at how often somebody holds the phone up to take a photo, but you're not actually able to really deeply engage and tune the conversation. I am really looking forward to the moment when people are sitting on a stream, throwing a question in, a curveball, slowing us down, and adding another level to whatever thinking we're doing.
You seem to find that very comfortable last Saturday when I was sitting in the airport.
Well, it's my first experience, right?
All right.
I'm used to having to watch out for Sammy's Discord window where she sends me DMs to go, hey, fix this.
So why don't you talk about some yellow ones then?
Well, I reckon we're going to go backwards and forwards a little bit over the yellow ones, because I looked down and I saw Candid over Vague as the first yellow one, and I went, okay, when you reorganized this to put the greens separate from the yellows, you stuck an extra value in. Candid over Vague wasn't there on the first cut, but I like it.
No, it was. You just I was less candid about it.
Did I somehow miss it? You were less candid about it. There you go. So you'll see a flavor of over. And I think for me, Candid over Vague, I'm more... The Vague thing, I think, is a self-awareness thing for us. We very easily, and we've detected this a little bit in our conversations, we very easily get into incredibly abstract thinking. Incredibly abstract at times. And sometimes the reminder to say, hey, we've got to come back down to earth a little bit. That's my actionable. Maybe we talk about an actionable version of each value as a way of processing this. So that's Candid over Vague for me. What's Candid over Vague for you, Eric, in simple terms?
The candid part is, frankly, name the thing we're talking about. I get very tired of the corporate doublespeak and the resistance to naming something out of fear of X. And it could be fear of hurting somebody's feelings, or fear of stirring the pot too much, or whatever else. But there's a lot of sources of fear that lead people to be vague and non-specific, instead of being specific and candid about, here's the thing we're talking about and why we're talking about it. now let's have a meaty, real conversation and let people's emotions come out if they need to. But
Yep.
the hand wavy softening it down doesn't serve a community.
So if we roll along, contribution over antagonism. If you go back to, and again, my easy expansion on this, if you go back to Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, he will say, if you can't do conflict, you can't grow. You have to find a way to do constructive conflict, because that's the way emergence and growth occurs. But if you're going to lean into conflict, it can't be antagonistic. It needs to be a positive provocation as opposed to a destructive criticism. So that's my expansion on that one. What's yours?
I think the candid example is the bashing attitude that we see in the overall Agile community right now. Every community wants to tear down and bash its neighbors rather than fixing things and creating growth. And the leaders I have seen in each of the communities are not that way. Talk to people across leadership of pretty much all of the dominant communities, and everybody is generative and trying to grow and contribute and create a better space. But there's a huge swath of the community that just wants to show how their part is better. And that's not contributory. That's antagonistic, that's poking the bear, that's trying to tear things down. And again, that's not the basis for a healthy community. It's not the basis for a healthy soul, in my opinion, but it's each their own.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and I think it's a really pertinent one if you think about the formative members of our group. Most of the people that are in this community right now are either SAFE fellows or SPCTs. Now, we've got one member who I met in a SAFE context, but if you talk to him about SAFE, he will say, as a coach, I spend my life trying to go and fix things that SAFE broke. And he'll say that largely not so much as a criticism of SAFE as the way it was interpreted, but there's a reality that SAFE, although it anchors a lot of our discussions, we travel pretty much everywhere. But it is amazing the amount of antagonism that exists around SAFE at the moment, and we want to explore all things as opportunities, which leads us to generative over extractive. And it really just, that builds on that thing. We want to build up everything we want to be a positive contribution, as opposed to tearing down. It's almost like it's a slightly different flavor of the contribution over antagonism.
I think I personally see them much different, or significantly different. And this goes back, you mentioned Manifesto for a Moral Revolution earlier. There's a phenomenal podcast where Tim Ferriss interviews Jacqueline Novogratz, who's the founder and CEO of Acumen and is the author of the book Manifesto for a Moral Revolution. And I listened to that podcast now 2 years ago on a long 6-day drive down to Baja, and it was the only podcast we listened to because we talked about it so much. And one of the key things that really struck me, and this is like a world level viewpoint for me, is the idea of generative capitalism over extractive capitalism. And it really ties more to leave the world a better place from a business, from an engagement, for how you contribute to the world. Like, do things that amplify the future for everybody, instead of removing stocks that future generations might rely on, or tearing things down, or removing things that we frankly need in the future. So while contribution over antagonism, I think, is a very personal and like directional thing in relationships for me, generative or extractive as kind of worldview and my relationship with the planet and society perspective.
It's an interesting, because I know the generative over extractive thing was definitely a Novogratz topic for us. And, you know, if you look at what she talks about with it in the manifesto, it's them recognizing, right, companies need to be funded and profitable to be successful, but that they wanted to fund and support companies who are growing the world rather than companies who were pillaging the world. Yep. In terms of what they did, right? And so there's that build up or tear down aspect to it, which I think, I mean, it was an amazing book when you thought about it through that lens, but I think you can apply it so broadly. And that's the linkage back to the contribution piece to me is, you know, when you look at an idea and you go, hey, I want to test it, stretch it, change it. And it might be an idea intellectually, it might be an idea in a company you're working with, right? Is the way you approach it trying to make something better? Or is it trying to extract something for your own purpose out of that moment?
Mm-hmm. Exploit is the word that comes to mind there.
Exploit would be, yeah, I pillage wasn't the right word for me at the time, but it was the first one that came to mind. I like exploit. Exploit, the word I should have picked before pillage. Yeah, and of course I left the preceding word off, pillage.
Exploit's a positive word in the theory of constraints that we're going to treat as negative in this context.
So curiosity over defensiveness. To be honest, I think in terms of the spirit of time boxing, we've probably covered curiosity over defensiveness in our chats about the other values.
I think so, yeah.
Impact over income, again, I feel like we've already talked about that.
Yep.
Responsibility over shoulding. And I think we debated, was it responsibility over othering or responsibility over shouldering? Or if we had Peter Senge straight in our heads, it would be, you know, the enemy is out there, and avoiding that.
Yep.
And that was definitely it's easy to sit and bemoan the state of the world, right? This should be a better place. Somebody should fix this. And it's very easy to get caught in that trap, right? Yeah. And there are various, if you think about hobby horses that we can return to it again and again and again. There are a few of those in the SAFE community.
Absolutely.
Where people just get trapped in a loop of, you know, they should fix this. And we really were very intentional about saying it's not pointing out stuff others should fix. It's asking ourselves how we can contribute to the change positively.
Yep. My consulting language for this has been, there is no they. Either find a way to help fix it, or let's get more people in the room so we, with the new we, can go fix it. Don't point at another group.
All right, that's our values. That was my guiding thread. So I guess we're tag teaming back to you, Eric, on governance.
Yeah, so we kind of covered a little bit of this in the opening, so I'll keep it quick. This is actually not the governance model. This is our script for the governance model you're looking at on the screen right now. One, just recognizing we're doing this as a stream because we don't want to formalize it by writing it down. We're talking about it because it's going to evolve. Test and learn, iterate constantly. This is today's version. That said, it hasn't significantly changed in the last month, so it's probably with us for at least another month, unless we learn something big. Mark, you want to handle the gaming intent, and you kind of covered that early on, but talk about guilds for a second.
I will talk about guilds for a second. So in my gaming past, once upon a time, I ran MMO guilds, and I began that in the late 90s, actually before we had voice chat for guilds, and then was probably over the best part of 15 years I was running these guilds. And when you run a gaming guild, you've got 40, 50, 60 people from all over the world, and you are trying to get them to operate with high discipline, military precision, and turn up. Like if it's a serious MMO guild, you once upon a time you're asking them to turn up 30 hours a week on time. And managing a community like that who notionally play a game to have fun is a really interesting thing. You are forming small groups, you're trying to get small groups to operate together as a large group, and you need leaders of small groups who can operate independently. You need to deal with the kind of cross-functional nature because your groups are cross-functional, but you need consistency across graph. There's an incredible number of parallels to everything that we talk about in our world of high-performing teams and teams of teams. And it taught me a lot of lessons. But one of the biggest lessons was to go, every single member of the guild needed to feel like a leader and have the opportunity to be a leader. And, Jerry Weinberg has this lovely definition of leadership where he says a leader is somebody people choose to follow. And he goes on, leadership is an action, not a something that's given to you as a mantle of authority. And we were constantly looking for each member of the guild, what is it they bring that's unique to them? There were the people who noticed when somebody hadn't been on for a few days, and instead of going, they didn't turn up and it hurt us because we needed their skill set, they went, are they okay? And they reached out. There were the people who loved to go and do research, and they weren't necessarily, quite often they weren't the best gamers, but they loved to do research and put analysis up on our guild forums. There was the guy who loved to build websites and manage forums. There were the people who were amazing players, but if you didn't have somebody keeping an eye out, they were busy antagonizing everybody who was less than amazing. So it's that hunt to go, how do you get this? Yes, we joined to play a game, but everybody in the guild has something to do besides playing a game. And the more that you can activate leadership in everybody, the more that you have something that thrives as a virtual community. And we were chatting about that the other night, again, when we went back for our last test of, how's our governance thinking evolving? How's it playing out? What are we seeing with various members as they join the community at the moment? And obviously resonated with Eric in terms of going, yes, we want that activation model, and recognizing that different people bring different value and giving them a chance to really maximize that value.
And as it relates to governance, being very attentive that we're not disempowering anybody.
Yeah.
Just avoiding any case where we're keeping people from being amazing or doing what they think is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And we'll see some experiments with various members in the near future, I think, around that. Earn-in model, we struggled. I don't know if we struggled. We talked a lot about how does somebody join. It's going to be a question. It's if we're building the community we want to build, we should have like armies of amazing people knocking down our doors wanting to be a part of it because we're trying to create a place that people love to be. And that begs the question of how do we decide if somebody comes in or not? Do Mark and I sit here on the high throne in judgment? For the moment, yes, briefly, until we get better at this, but we don't want to be in that state. So right now, the best we have on this is the path to being a part of the community is by earning your way in through energy, consistency, contribution, living the values. Basically, earn trust. Um, Now, the type of people that I expect to join, we already trust. We know you all. It's going to be out. You're out there. You're doing cool things. Um, but it's a community of people that contribute and show up and demonstrate that they belong in the community. I think that's the only sustainable way I know how to structure something like this.
Yeah, we went backwards and forwards so much on this in the beginning because I remember the first circle was, well, we had four of us there at the earlier conversations. It was Eric, me, Sahil, and Wolfgang, and I was like, well, is it the four? And then what happened when you added up the number of time zones that we were collaborating across? It was, it's always an interesting exercise getting the four of us across the time zones. And then it's like, okay, but when we get together, if we manage to get across the time zones, everybody wanted to talk about exciting, creative stuff, not governance. And Eric and I we hit a point, and I can't remember when that moment was. We sat and chatted one day, and we went, you know what? If we're going to get this moving forward, maybe it's just us, and that lets us to shape and make decisions and test them pretty rapidly. Literally, from a simplicity perspective.
And it's worth mentioning, we did receive consent for this. We didn't just impose it. We checked. But it's let us accelerate things, and we're still on opposite sides of the world and have to be intentional when we collaborate, but we can just move. And I trust Mark to make a significant part of decisions. I presume he trusts me given the keys to the various kingdoms he's offered me, so it's where we're going to do it.
I think we're also we're pretty good at checking in, right? It's that notion of, have you got shared vision and values, and then you go, I know the thing I can confidently just do.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when I check with Eric or Eric checks with me to go, how do you feel about X? But it does let us operate pretty fast with the limited number of check-ins.
And then a side effect of that is it also lets us focus on slow, purposeful growth. We're not in a rush. We're not trying to create a 500-person community or anything silly like that. So keep it small, move fast, learn quickly, and then open the doors a little bit when it's time. So where do the doors lead, Mark? Do you want me to share the screen, or you want to introduce what you're about to cover? Let me see how I did
that. I looked and I went, you know what? Given the amount of zooming in and out you're going to need to do walking the zones, maybe I'll do a quick high-level overview and then let you start to zone and walk the zoom levels, and I'll chip in where I need to.
Okay.
So we really played with, and you can see we've got at the moment, we've got we've got zone 0, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4. And it's that way of going, what's the level of activity and what's the level of trust and expectation as being kind of the different ways that we identified members of the community. And zone 0 emerged from the discussion Eric and I were just talking about, where it was, hey, we've got to be able to make some decisions, and how do we do that? And we went, okay, well, it is Eric and me, and we tested it with Wolfgang Sahil, and I'm pretty sure I remember Wolfgang going, somebody's got to worry about that stuff. I'm glad it's not me. But that was that emergence of going, okay, at the end of the day, the people, to be honest, right now, who are doing a lot of the background legwork, creating websites, Twitch accounts, doing tutorials in OBS, or OBS for architects courses, or administering the Discord server.
Mark, I found the next level of interaction.
So that's the beginning there, and the rest of it becomes that notion, and I would tie it back a little bit to the thread. I mean, I've known Eric for, I think, 12 years now. Uh, I know we met at a rally on back before SAFE was a thing.
Yeah.
Because I remember Mark Kilby introducing me to you and going, "Oh, Eric is like the Zen master coach of coaches in our coaching community." Um, I don't know if you knew that's how he introduced you, Eric, but that's how he did.
No,
Um,
I had no idea.
the quiet guy is going to sit in the corner and say nothing until he comes out with some profound thing that makes us all re-examine everything. That was the Mark Kilby description of you. So, I mean, we've known each other a long time and we've had talks in all corners of the world about all kinds of things. But the amount of conversation we've had over the last few months about our values and the way we make decisions and finding that alignment has been immense. And that values-based alignment has been part of our thinking about the way we structure the community. Is as people engage more deeply, you get a chance to test and validate values-based alignment, which tests and validates. And, you know, I'll just use a really easy example. We hold very strongly that our streams and all of our interactions as a community should reflect our values. That we won't on a stream go and bash something, and that if a stream's happening and there's the chance that something destructive is occurring, we've got somebody on the stream who is going to moderate it and pull us back. And, you know, it takes time to build and validate that values-based understanding. So that was part of the concept. Part was going, you know, there are people who aren't going to want to do all of that stuff, but they just want people they can interact with and collaborate with on key topics. So we've got to recognize different levels of interest and activity. But then there's the flip side to that. And if I had a pithy on hand at the moment, again, with the fifth discipline kind of high in my head, what you want is people actively learning together, not expecting the organization to learn for them. And I think there's an entry zone where people, you know, it's easy to say, hey, that's a cool idea, but then turn up as a visitor or spectator rather than a contributor. And that's okay because we want to share. But what we want is to know who the people are who are, you know, bought in and you know, really contributing actively as opposed to getting value, but perhaps less interested in the big contributions. So there's my kind of skyscraper view, at which point I'll hand to Eric to start to zoom and pan.
All right, now I get to do the hard part here. I also tried to add some. I'm gonna kill that. It's getting dark here, and I don't have my studio lighting completely set up correctly yet. So lesson learned, but we'll just keep going with the glare on the glasses. So Mark mentioned we've got a handful of zones, and this is where it's like, as soon as I start drawing something like this, I'm like, oh my goodness, are we just writing the big rule set? Are we just adding stuff for the sake of adding stuff? And then I remember we're inspired by gaming on this, and every role-playing game at least has a nice little stack of levels that unlocks more and more stuff as you do it. And we didn't explicitly model this after any sort of gaming leveling, but it's certainly compatible. And again, this is all draft. It's just current thinking, but kind of starting at which end? Start at the top or the bottom? What do you think? I'm actually torn on that.
Well, let's maybe journey inwards. I like that. Let's start in zone 4. Take the journey.
All right. So, hey, you're here. You click subscribe maybe on the stream. Congratulations, you're zone 4. Throw stuff into the stream, ask questions, be engaged on YouTube and Twitch. Clearly it's not a level, like in the sense that we're authorizing it or approving. This is just, we're out there, we're in public, and we want to recognize that people in zone 4, and I'll put some big air quotes around that, you're a part of the community. And I kind of fully suspect that there are members of that community that will engage more. And show us that they want to be more involved, and that's one of our values. Like we talk about earning in and we talk about contribution. That's where we start to move into zone 3. Some of those people will start to invite into our Discord for conversation. Those are the people who will probably ask for feedback on stuff before it goes out there. And also we have that group we mentioned from the Prague Safe Summit, the SBCT day there. People that are contributing, doing community-related work for those special efforts. Also, that's kind of the zone 3. And what does that really mean? You're in Discord. I mean, it's a lot of piss just to say that. You're in Discord, you're in the public channels, you're having a conversation. Congratulations, welcome. The people that are contributing the most, you notice there's a bunch of yellow post-its down there. You may or may not recognize the names, but those are people that have shown interest, that are already kind of part of the core community, and the more they engage, the more they're going to do. It's a path to say, yes, you're doing stuff. Congratulations. And the higher collaboration, you'll earn trust, both through frequency and the way you carry yourself. And I think that's the point when you're zone 2 is where we'll start to show you on the website, and we'll start to have links out to the things you sell, and you're kind of part of that core creator community of agile thought leaders that we hope that Shaping Agility represents. And there's actually small noise on there I'm not going to cover. And later on, that group I expect will also start to host streams and be able to invite people to participate in the streams and whatever. Like that's the community creator level. As we get into zone 1, that's where you've contributed enough, and I kind of make this akin to being invited to be a mod on a server, like on a Minecraft server in a community. It's like, hey,
That's the most beautiful parallel.
it really is. It's come on in
Yeah.
and help us maintain this community. You're doing awesome work, and we'd love to see you help people even more. Is really my attitude there. You probably start to carry Shaping Agility as a little part of your identity at that point, because you're on the website, you're contributing, you're helping shape the community, you're approving of changing content, you're running the streams. That's kind of what I picture that. And that was where we thought everything would be until, as Mark mentioned, for now, Mark and I will just step up and shape the shaping. Like let's shape the community and claim that overall governance for the moment. And then over time, ease things out. I expect to see less and less reside in zone 0. Probably holding on only to the golden share equivalent to say, no, we're not selling the thing. It's not a commercial entity at some point. Because that was one of our earliest conversations, is what happens if one of us decides we want to make this a commercial entity and tries to take it over. Didn't expect Mark to do that. Don't expect myself to do that. But I've watched that happen to enough communities on my career already. I want to create something special, not something that goes down that path. I think I did that in like 2 minutes. You want to add anything?
I don't know that I did. I think your Zoom level was appropriate. People could read the post-its. I'm sure some of the names on the post-its will reach out to us over the next few days. The only probably other thing I'd say here, and this is again in the spirit of the fact that we are becoming a bit more public this week, and I'm debating whether we need to add a value called radical transparency, Eric, to our greens. I like it as a value personally, but it's a small number of names because right now we don't want to swamp. And there's all kinds of people I could think of and go, yep, I'd love to have them join us eventually. But we've literally maybe added one person every 2 or 3 weeks for tops over the last few months.
It's like, it's 1.2 people per week.
And if you tie it back, and maybe I'll tie it back to Novogratz and the manifesto from Moral Revolution, rather than going agile with it. She talked a lot in that book about the way that they work with organizations to stop them trying to scale too fast. And in actual fact, it was a really dominant recurring theme for her, because the reason that so many of them struggle to access traditional finance is because traditional finance wants rapid scale. And she talks, it was patient finance. There was a term for it, wasn't it?
Capital.
Patient capital. That was it. I knew it was patient something. Patient capital, right? That idea of knowing that if you take your time and you get it right before you scale, that your chance of actually fulfilling your purpose and your why is radically higher. And I actually thought it was much like, we'd probably in our normal, usual geeky stuff, we'd talk about product market fit, we'd talk about crossing the chasm, we'd talk about MVPs. But I thought it was a really powerful, what I loved about the way she really emphasized again and again and again with the patient capital model was the way that it helped you to hold true to your purpose when scaling came. Because scaling challenges your purpose, and you've really got to lock that foundation in before you start to deal with the impact of scaling. And I think it ties back really nicely to the way that we've been trying to figure out shaping agility and learn from it as we go.
Great. Yeah, how do you want to close this?
I don't know. Let's close with the usual radical transparency. We had a big debate just before we started this to go, is this just going to be a recording we put on Discord, or are we going to stream it? And we looked and we checked back all the post-its and we went, are we testing anybody's privacy because there's names on the post-its, or are they all really public figures anyway? Is there anything there? And I was like, no, we just want to be transparent. And getting to the end of it and having streamed it, I'm really glad we chose to stream it, because it just continues to live the values of, a very public learning journey that in its transparency is really holding us to account on our values. So it's been fun.
Excellent. I agree. Yeah, open source plus gaming plus agility.
Yeah.
All right. If anybody's still listening, thank you very much. This concludes our draft 0.1 of governance for the model, effective 10/10/23 or 10/12/23, depending on whether you take the date we drew the post-its or the date we finished the stream. Yeah, I continue to be excited.
Or 10/13/23 if you're in Australia.
Yeah, fine. 13/10.
I thought about that and I went, no, I'm not going to stretch it that far.
All right.
Alrighty.
Have a good day, and head off, have some dinner here, and catch you up later.
Alrighty. Ciao.